Thank you, Lascan Corda. Minister, just asked this question just in relation to the beef producer groups that you yourself has made many claims about over the negotiations with the beef sector and the farmers. And I'm just wondering just how they're actually going to work in practice given the lack of competition within the beef sector.
Minister, number 3.
First of all, thanks for asking this question, because I'm very pleased to have an opportunity to outline what I think beef producers can do in Ireland. First of all, as a minister, as you know, I can't get involved in influencing price directly. Right? I've already got now 2 letters from the Competition Authority in relation to making it very clear how far the beef forum can go on a whole series of issues and where it can't go in relation to trying to influence directly price. So what we can do, however, is we can try and restructure the beef industry in a way that ensures that farmers increase their negotiating capacity around everything from price to spec to conditions in the market, through information flow between processor and farmer around what the market needs, when it needs it, and so on. And if you look at other parts of Europe, producer organisations that represent large numbers of farmers collectively together and negotiate on their behalf, you see better outcomes than we have here. One of the big weaknesses in the beef sector, which isn't the case in the dairy sector, is that effectively farmers are price takers. When they go to the factory with cattle, there's no negotiation at all. And then farming organisations need to put a lot of pressure on through protest and so on if they're unhappy with prices. Instead, in the future, in my view, there's a better way of doing things, whereby farmers, maybe 1,000 of them, or 2,000 of them, or 3,000 of them that are producing beef, would be represented by a farmer-owned producer organisation who would negotiate on their behalf, who would be responsible for the communication between the marketplace, represented by processors or retailers, and the primary producers, who are farmers, to make sure that primary producers are getting the fairest deal possible from the marketplace. And that, in my view, will fundamentally change the balance of negotiating power between farmers and factories in a way that at the moment is being expressed through protest.
Thank you, Minister.
And so we now have had a public consultation process on how the different stakeholders would like to see producer organisations working. It's in the interest of processors as well, in my view, because they'll have a much more professional negotiating system with primary producers in terms of ensuring quality and spec and all the other things.
Thank you, Minister.
And we intend on pushing on with this now, and we have approval from all of the stakeholders in the beef forum to do that.
Deputy Pringle.
Thank you, Minister. It's true to say that farmers are price takers because they have no choice, because there is basically no competition, as I can see, within the beef sector in this country. I mean, basically you have 3 major players with 1 very dominant player out of that. So in reality, the competition isn't there. Over the last 20 years or so, many thousands of very small abattoirs around the country have been put out of business by an increasing regulation, and that's taken all those people out of the buying market for beef, where you're left with the 3 factories. Now, if a farm producer organisation pulls together 1,000 farmers and negotiates a deal, but the only deal they can get is further down the country, further away, and they have to transport the cattle, what use does that deal to them? I think the fundamental problem is that we don't have competition within the factory sector, rather than the fact that farmers have been forced into being price takers, and I think that's just papering over the cracks. And it'll actually streamline the process probably for the factories, remove the threat of protest, and allow them to continue on.
Thank you, Deputy Minister.
I totally disagree with your assessment of it, and I think others do too, which is why everybody in this sector at the moment is willing to facilitate the introduction of producer organisations, mainly farming organisations, actually. You know, I think the factories are willing to, or the processing industry are willing to look at it. They have no choice anyway, because we're going ahead with it. But I think this is about increasing and improving farmer representation. You know, it is true to say that we have 3 big players in the market, but there are a lot of other processors as well. It's not true to say that we only have 3 processors that are killing cattle. We also have live cattle exports, which have been used to introduce competition into this market for cattle, both cross-border live cattle exports, as well as live cattle exports to places like North Africa and other parts of Europe. And actually, live cattle exports are up significantly this year. So, I just don't accept the accuracy of your assessment of the marketplace. Producer organisations work well in other countries, where there are also big processors.
Thank you, Minister.
Don't forget, and I'll finish on this, don't forget that we export product to 90% of our beef has to find a home and a consumer and a buyer and a client outside of Ireland. In order to facilitate that trade, we do need processors that have scale.
Thank you, Minister.
And we have a competition authority to make sure that they're not abusing that position. But in my view, we can restructure the marketplace here to increase the negotiating power of farmers through POs, which will be owned by farmers,
I must call
not by
Pringle
anybody
now.
else.
Sorry, Minister.
And I think that is a good thing, and I think you should welcome it.
Deputy Pringle.
Minister, I suppose the only thing we can do is time will tell. And if we see in a couple of years' time we're back at protests again, because I do believe that the fundamental problem is that the market is controlled by too few operators. And if you look at international markets, I'm sure they have a competition authority that actually has the teeth to be able to investigate and to carry out investigations of markets that aren't functioning right. I mean, it's not that long ago since the Competition Authority made public statements here to say that they couldn't carry out any investigations because of the staffing issues and not having staff to be able to do it. So, I mean, would you be willing to call in the Competition Authority and ask them to investigate the beef sector if it shows that these producer groups aren't achieving the goals that you've set out for them?
Come on, Minister, fine reply.
First of all, there's no need for me to call the Competition Authority at all, although we've spoken to them. They contacted us in relation to the Beef Forum to understand what's going on. So, the Competition Authority is very plugged in and very engaged on beef issues, and has in the past looked at the beef market. But I mean, I could quote statistics around beef prices in terms of average EU prices, EU 15 prices, the comparisons between Ireland and Britain, and so on, all day. But the Competition Authority is an independent statutory body, and as they should be. And if there is evidence that there is inappropriate behaviour happening in the beef sector, I'm pretty confident that they will intervene. But they haven't done so. And what we're trying to do now, which is my job, is to ensure that a beef forum works in all of the areas where I should be influencing and developing policy. And that's what we're attempting to do today. And
Thank
I think we will get a lot done today, actually, at the Beef Forum, on a whole series of areas from weights to age to base price to more transparency in terms of receipt dockets, and to a whole series of other areas where farmers have expressed concerns to me over the last 12 months.
Let's go on to the next question,
and that's what the Beef Forum should be doing.